more comfortable. I guess it's more comfortable. I'm more comfortable now than I was when I was a pro boarder, because I run the business I work for, instead of like someone being like, hey, you didn't do a double cork, you cut.
You're like, actually, I run this business, so I'm not going to cut myself. But now you have to cut people, because if they're not good at their job, you got to let people go. Even if they're good, sometimes you got to trim the fat.
Hey, I've had to drop a couple coaches, and I now understand why DC cut me cold turkey. It makes total sense to me once I sort of had a reflection on when I had to fire a coach, because I tried to linger this coach on because I liked them and I wanted to use them in other camps, but I annoyed them enough when I had to drop them the first time that I knew that every time they came back, they were always going to be jaded. And I realized when DC did it to me at the time, I was like, oh, can't you just give me like half the pay or whatever? But I would have been bummed at half the pay, and I would have been upset at the brand itself. So I feel like it makes sense when they do just go bang, it's over. It makes more sense to just cut ties completely rather than having someone on the team that's like sort of bummed at them.
Totally. You don't want to have animosity between two people who used to be friends. It makes it more difficult because then there's childish antics maybe.
That's right.
Floating around. But what would be the main reason why you let go of that coach? Like, was it because of their character? Was it because of their lack of ability with coaching, or was it because their snowboarding wasn't dope? Or
no, we didn't. I promised. Well, I sort of said, look, I think I can get you a job, but I go on a ratio of one coach to every 5 kids, and he just didn't get enough kids to hire him. And he'd been with me for a long time, 3 years, but he also like probably lost me a few kids along the way. He was sort of he still wanted to be the snowboarder guy and coach at the same time, and it's very hard to gel those two together. So yeah, it was just it just didn't fit properly. I still love the guy and I still hang out with him now, and he's better now. Like, we still go shred and stuff, and he's moved on to different things. So it's all good, but yeah, just things you learn. It was my first person I had to let go. So yeah, fun times.
I actually was just coaching last week at Momentum Camps, which historically on the Whistler Glacier was always just COC, and Dave Murray camp, so 2 snowboard camps, and then Momentum, which always has been a ski camp. But now they're letting snowboarders in because they feel bad for us, because our side of the glacier doesn't have any more snow. It's all rock. So they're like, we'll let you in. But it was nice to get back to coaching. But to elaborate on what you were just saying there, I can kind of attest to there's a way to snowboard, and there's a way that you hang out with people that are snowboarding, which is awesome. But there's also a way to like coach, and they're 2 very different things. And so the first couple of days I was kind of talking and using antics that I typically use around my snowboard friends. And then I hadn't coached for a couple of years because of COVID, and I kind of soon realized that I'm like, oh, there needs to be a different dialogue here, and I need to go into coach mode, which is, like you were saying, very different. And once I got into that mode, I was like, damn, this works best for teaching people. Yeah. It's like you're speaking a lot slower with some more clarity, and you're not just using code words and snowboard lingo that somebody who's been snowboarding for 3 years isn't going to know. And there's probably a certain way to go about being professional too. If he's hanging out with younger kids, you kind of have to, be kind of the parent chaperone. I don't know what kind of camp you're running. You know what I mean? Like, if it's tight, if you have drinking around, or if you have underage kids, you constantly have to be aware of your surroundings.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we do 24/7 care. Like, they're with us for 2 weeks at home, no drinking, get sent home, drugs, get sent home, no boys in girls' rooms, like the full deal, like proper 24/7 care. So, you know, obviously we can have banter and have fun and get along with the kids. That's epic. But, and like you were saying, it's just the way you sort of communicate snowboarding. And it takes a while, or it took me a while to figure out how to speak my snowboarding that I had in my head, because I never taught snowboarding really until afterwards. And I worked for this company called TSE when I left snowboarding, professional snowboarding. I started coaching, and I was like, every time I'd say something, I was like, is that right? Like, because I'd never actually said what I thought out loud. I was super big visualizer and I could see everything in my head. So I never actually, and I never really got coached either. I just rode with like Charles Beckinsale and we just followed each other around and just like learned tricks. So learning how to visualize, vocalize your thoughts is actually quite difficult if you haven't done it. So that's one thing that I've been working on. And different styles of coaching too. Obviously, you have different kids. Like the kids I work best with are the visual kids, because that's how I learn. So for me, I'm just like, I just show them. I'm like, all right, I don't even have to tell them anything. I'm just like, just do this, just follow me. And they're just a blank canvas. They just go off and they just do it. And then that sort of works well. But the ones that need more articulation and vocal input, they're the harder ones for me, but it's something that I've been working on. So yeah, always stuff to learn.
Yeah, the whole group I had, I would say half the group was learning much better by me explaining how to do, the lip slide that we were learning on this flat box, where the other half was very, can you go and do a lip slide and just show me? And by me going, they can kind of be like, okay, this is what my body needs to look like in order to do that. Which for me, I'm the same way. I'm all visual. I've always been like that. I've been hands-on. That's the reason why the schooling system, at least in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, seemed to me to be, I guess I didn't really know at the time, but it's just like a system that doesn't work for me at all. It's like there's no way that that's going to bring out the best in me and help me, showcase my strengths. I always felt like school was a way to, if anything, like showcase how weak I was. But it wasn't until I got into snowboarding and I realized that I had a lot of strengths that just weren't, that I wasn't able to show my teachers and classmates in a school setting. And then I was like, whoa, I'm a really good public speaker and I'm not scared. And I didn't really realize going in school that there's, 80% of people are terrified of public speaking, which is like, there's a skill set there. And then there's also like the whole snowboarding is this beautiful thing, especially when you're young, to kind of like an arts class to be like, and the whole blank canvas thing, which I kind of hate. It's like this cliche thing of saying with snowboarding, you have this blank canvas, but you really do. And since our park was so horrendous, it was just like, you had to be a creative snowboarder to make that park fun, or your days were just long and dreadful because it was just a sheet of ice with ice blocks and terrible bent pieces of steel. So it's like, if you weren't like able to like, oh, I'm going to freestyle this, it's just, there was no way to have any fun. So yeah, anyways, I agree. I was a complete visual learner myself. And there's 2 different ways or 3 different ways to coach. And I commend you on taking on that task, because it is, I don't think that people it's when you're thinking that hard to teach somebody, it's hard. It's difficult to teach somebody to do something well. And when you're doing that all day, I find like when I get home, I am drained. Like I'm very tired, because it's like takes a lot of thought, and you have to like care to be like, okay, this is really why you're struggling with that backside 3. It's easy to just say bend your knees.
It's like when you coach and you're like, I'm in the grind. That's what it feels like to me. Like I'm in the grind, learning it with them. Like I might as well be doing it. That's what it feels like to me. And that's why I love coaching, is because I still get the joy of when they stomp it. Like I'm arms up, like frothy, like so pumped. Like I get that feeling again, because I've been in there sort of working it with him, and I've seen him or her fall a bunch of times, and then they just get it and it clicks and they do it. And, it's that feeling that kept me wanting to chase new tricks for myself, but I get the same feeling out of coaching, which is cool. And I didn't know it would be like that, but it is, which is rad.
No, it's a special feeling. I taught a camper how to do a tail slide 270 this past week. And beginning of the week was like 50-50s to crooked board slides, then to lip slides, into lip slide fakies, then tail slide 270s. And he ended up getting it. I was stoked. But I feel like a big part of my stoke was at the beginning of the week, we weren't really friends. A week goes by of coaching somebody, you have a relationship building that whole time. And when they land that shit, you're like, damn, this is sick. Like, we're kind of friends now. I know what you're about. And I taught you how to do a trick. There's something special about that connection. Like, yeah, you can teach somebody, you can hike a box with them and teach them it in 30-40 minutes how to do a trick. But when you have like a week, 5 days, a lot of time sitting on chairlifts and talking, and you build a relationship with somebody and then you teach them a trick, it feels like there's just that little bit of added element of like human connection. And then you know that this person really wanted to learn that trick. And it's kind of like, damn, and he did it good. The tail and I was kind of harsh, you know what I mean? He did some scrapey ones. And he's like, how was it? I was like, damn, it wasn't that good. I was trying to teach him. Like, I think everyone who's listening to this podcast right now is most people probably done a front three or whatever. But I was trying to like explain how you kind of want to come around and hug it on your toe edge. So if you're doing the tail slide 270, you'd rather be a little bit toe edge heavy than heel edge. So you can kind of like, you can do like the dope skateboard scrape on the ground, like the pivot, or It doesn't make that noise, but that's the way I always think about it. If I see someone do like a pretzel or a 270, I'm always like, damn, that's the noise it makes in my head, is that little skateboard like.
Yeah, you want to be like on the inside of the rail, right? Catch it.
Exactly, Ryan. Because you're a coach. But that's a chapter I feel like I want to get into a little bit later, because I feel like there's some build up to that chapter of your life that you're on right now, and I commend you for that. But maybe we can throw it back to childhood, just so people have some insight to who Ryan Tiene is before he got on DC and got a DC ring.
Well, yeah, I was born in Australia, Australian, still live here now. Grew up in Jindabyne, which is sort of the gateway town to where Perisher and Thredbo are. So I went to school there, grew up skiing, started skiing when I was 4, switched over. Me and my friends were like, when we started high school, we were like, let's snowboard, like, let's switch it up. So it's a horrible skier. We just switched it up, and then picked it up quite quickly, got into some like development programs at Perisher, and just sort of started doing well. Got picked up by a local shop, Time to Ride, and then they hooked me up with Rusty. Rusty made outerwear back in the day, and I was on Sims 3 bankruptcies ago, I suppose. And then then I went to I finished year 10, and I worked cleaning boots at a like a sports check, like a Rebel Sport. We have it here in Australia. I was cleaning boots, mobile boots in the back, saving up cash. And then the day after my year 10 formal, quit school, didn't do 11, 12, bounced straight to Whistler with Charles Beckinsale, who you guys might know. He builds a lot of amazing parks, and he's a dope snowboarder as well. But
he is.
His mum looked after me, and I was there when I was 16, and just rode the park day in, day out, just straight 6 months, McDonald's dollar menu, rice, spaghetti, just living the cheapest possible. I think I went there with like $4,000, and I stayed there for like 4.5 months.
And now rent is $4,000 for 1 month.
Yeah. And I lived in Montebello, like it was sick. Like we had a dope spot with the hot tub. I was right there, like behind Marketplace. So yeah, and then I just learned so I went there, I couldn't do a front three, and I came home and I had all 4 nines, which was like
Damn, dude. Now
so
people are listening to this being like, so if I can barely do a front three by the end of it, people are goal setting right now because it's, you know, here in Canada anyways, it's off season. So people are like, all right, you know, if I can barely do a front three, hopefully by the end of next year, I can do all 4 nines. I almost don't believe you. You could barely front three and then you left.
do other spins though. I could do back sevens, cab. I was all right at cab. No switch backside. No way.
Wow.
And then, yeah, just, I don't know. It just
clicked.
Just figured it out. I remember there was like the transfer jump in Grey Line back in the day. And I learned front fives there one day and I was like, oh, this isn't that hard to spin front side. I guess before I was corking, so I was like dropping my shoulder and I was doing like crazy like underflips and just dying. And once I figured out how to like square up my shoulders and almost dip forwards, I guess then I started figuring out front side. And then yeah, it all gelled. I came back home to Australia and then I won like every comp that year, like slopestyle, rails. I won Star Wars that year, which is a comp that people might have heard of. Torstein's won that and a bunch of other people back in the day. But yeah, I won Star Wars and I won all these things. And then I started getting picked up by, you know, DC, Oakley, all my sponsors I had throughout my career, I pretty much had from that point on. And from there, it sort of slowed down a little bit. I went to Salt Lake City and I did 2 years. And I think my career was based around opportunity and just luck from where I was situated. So I went to Salt Lake City and I got invited to go up to the Mountain Lab. And I met Nick Olson, who's my team manager at the time. You know, Nick. And Jeeves was up there as well. And I was shredding with Jeeves and they were filming for Mountain Lab 1.5. And I was up there, Pierre was up there filming and I just got a couple clips and I was hyped. I was pretty stoked. And then they ended up coming out to New Zealand that following year. And that's when we filmed that crazy shit with Ken Block and his rally car at Snow Park. And I'm the guy that nearly gets hit by the car. If you watch that Mountain Lab 1.5 part where he drifts past me, nearly hits me in the butt.
I remember that.
My claim.
That shot was like almost just as sketchy as like Torstein hitting the jump with him. Or is it? I think Torstein did and Eddie Wall, right?
Yeah, Eddie and Torstein and Jonas Carlson actually hit it, but they I don't know how they did it back in the day, but they erased him because I think he crashed in there.
Poor dude, Jonas got kind of like, he was always the best, and I feel like DC was just not the company for him to be on. He needed to ride for like Capita.
Like Air Blaster or something. Like he was one of those, like sort of seemed like he was one of those guys. But because he did the Transworld movie and he was crushing it in that one. I think that was, can't remember what movie that was, but the one where Chad Otterstrom had a stick part in it. One of the early Transworld movies, but he was in that and he crushed it. But yeah, it was pretty hard to compete against Torstein, and that's what we were all sort of compared against.
All right, you kind of flew through some chapters here. So one thing I wanted to ask you is, growing up, just because you live in Australia and it's a different world out there, what kind of music, movies did you grow up listening to and watching? And like, how was Ryan Tiene dressing? You know, were you like a little hip hop head? Did you have dreads? Did you have a fro? What was the Ryan Tiene look? And what kind of music and movies were you listening to? Just so I have a glimpse into who this Ryan Tiene child is.
Yeah, I think I was a bit of a chameleon. So I was like, you won't even believe what I was. In high school, I had like dyed black hair. I got my tongue pierced. I had eyebrow piercing. Like I was sort of pretty punk. Like I was listening to, who was I listening to?
Taking Back Sunday.
What's that band called?
AFI.
I'll think of it like Linkin Park and stuff like that. I was like into a bit of that punk, but then my snowboarding didn't really look like that either. I was like, because I watched my first video that I got was off Charles. It gave me a VHS of technical difficulties, and then I fell in love with like Walsh and the baggy pants and everything. So then I just switched it up completely and still had the tongue piercing for a while, but then I turned into a bit of a, I was buying like baggy polo shirts from the outlet stores and big resi back in the day before it got pulled down, and now it's back up. But yeah, that's where I was. What else was there in that question?
Music, you covered music, and then like movies, you kind of covered it all there. I like that you fearlessly tackled that question, because I feel like you could have easily navigated that lighter, but I like the details, because I too in high school was a little bit of a chameleon, because I lived outside of Winnipeg, small town. Confusing, I didn't know how to dress either. And I think a lot of people when they're really young, unless they just happen to be this steezy kid that knows what's up. But if you're from a town like me, that's like 1,000 people, it's like, I don't know what was going on. One day I was dressing kind of emo. The next day I'd be like G'd out. Like, yeah, that's dope. And then another question to follow that up before you touched on the chapter of Whistler and stuff, which is kind of getting ahead. But what was the New Zealand scene like? Like, who are the standout guys that you remember watching? And like, what was the whole scene like back in Oz?
Yeah, so we had a pretty good scene. We had Robbie Walker, who was crushing it. He was a little bit older than me. I don't know if you remember Robbie. He had like
I do. He was sick.
In People movie. He did a fair bit of time in Whistler. And then we had some strong riders across the pond. We had Jake Coyer, who was from New Zealand. But we all sort of, I guess we were all sort of one unit, like in a sense. We were all in the same. All the brands worked Australia and New Zealand, so we're all in like the same teams and stuff like that. So those two, we had Clint Allen as well, Mitch Allen. We had Nick Gregory, who had a shot in positron, I think, on. He was like my sort of Aussie idol. He was on Red Bull back in the day, Nick Gregory. He had a switchback 7 maybe on Perfect Jump. Yeah, so he's just got like 1 or 2 shots in that movie. So he was like the first Aussie guy to like get a little clip in one of the Big Dog movies. So he was sort of my Aussie inspo. But those were sort of the guys that I looked up to and rode with a lot.
I like that you touch on him, Nick Gregory, being like the one guy. So I'm curious, because Canada's attached to the US, which is like kind of the Mecca. I feel like Europe's kind of always had its own thing, but then there's like Japan, New Zealand, Australia, et cetera, Russia, whatever. And they all had like their own little micro scenes with their own magazines and their own movies. So growing up, did you just read New Zealand and Australia magazines? You said that you got Tech Diff. So I'm imagining you're getting all the movies and the DVD, or not DVDs, the VHSs at the time. But are you growing up on Snowboarder Mag and Transworld, or did you kind of feel like you had your own magazines, which I'm imagining, correct me if I'm wrong, would kind of create this own like echo chamber of what's going on there. But then you go to Whistler and you're like, what the fuck? This is like totally different.
Well, that's right. Like at one point we had 3 different magazines in Australia, and they were all producing 3. So we had 9 magazines a year. So it was epic for me. Like once I turned pro later on, like I was getting mad photo incentive because there wasn't many of us out there doing it, but we had 9 issues to fill. So it was pretty dope. But yeah, like I definitely had that echo chamber, and I think that's one of the things that I was able to escape from, because it's easy to get stuck into that in that bubble of being like Aussie pro, I guess, and a lot of people would have fell victim to that, and I've seen it in the past. But Yeah, I mean, it changed a lot from when I was younger. Like we couldn't even get Transworld. You didn't see what was going on, and all those different zones. Europe, Japan, America, Canada. They all could have their own sort of teams, and no one would know what anyone else was doing because you wouldn't hear it or see it. And that's why teams were so big. And you had like APAC teams and Japan teams, Canada teams, US teams, and then everything sort of shrinked up, and that's why a lot of people got cut and teams are a lot smaller because you see everything now. But yeah, I don't know if I got off track there, but I start rambling this
No,
early.
no, I'm down with the rambling for sure. Please continue to ramble whenever you're going. I guess it was like at 3 magazines. Out of those 3, are any of them still around? And which ones were kind of the most important to like riders like yourself, Jake Koya, et cetera, et cetera?
Yep.
Did any of them like, this is the dope magazine, they're still around? Did one of the dope magazines that would have been like a blunt magazine that was cool and edgy actually go under? Or is it just transfers the shit and that's it?
This is the only one that still exists. They don't do a magazine anymore. They're more like a website with like news, and they do some video stuff. And but yeah, that was the one. I got the first cover of that magazine in Whistler, their first ever edition back in, I don't know when it was, 2010 maybe, or 2009. That magazine came out. So it wasn't the first, but it ended up being the dopest. It was just run by snowboarders instead of like a corporation. And there was Australian New Zealand Snowboarding Magazine, which we'll probably get onto it later, but I edited that magazine for 1 year after I finished snowboarding as well, which was pretty fun. And then there was Australian Snowboarder. So yeah, we had 3 mags, but Transfer is definitely the dopest, and that's still the one, and that's the one that's still like kicking on.
And they don't do any more print. So Australia print magazines done.
Nothing. And we can't get the US mags either, so we don't have anything.
What do you that seems surprising that you guys can't get like a magazine from the US. I mean, like there's Slush now. I think Snowboarder Mag is still around. At least I see them on social media. Transworld's dead. Snowboard Canada for us was a huge one, but it's all over the place. And then King Snow is like my favorite magazine in Canada by far. And I think I like that they print people from all over the world too. It's like a Canadian magazine. It's definitely about uplifting the Canadian riders, but they do post and print other snowboarders from around the world, which I thought was cool. And growing up, being in Canada, I always saw like Transworld and Snowboarder Mag and stuff like that. And I remember seeing riders like Jake Koya in it, et cetera, and being like, I liked seeing that those magazines seemed pretty like they were a global snowboard magazine. They'd be like Tadashi Fuse and stuff like that, which I mean, obviously you're spending a lot of time filming in Whistler at that time, but it seemed like an international snowboard magazine, which I don't think there's any magazine right now or publication that seems international. Like there's Torment Mag, but it's like that's pretty, they got their own bubble, etc. But so I think there's almost room for like a massive like international snowboard website, maybe not doing print anymore, that's like a little bit more like inclusive to like everyone snowboarding. But I don't know if that's a good idea and if that's a good money maker. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a good idea. I think that's what it should be. I think everyone should be held, snowboarders should be held accountable to all other snowboarders, and we should have one spot where the dopest stuff sits and it's easy for anyone to go look at and view. And that makes total sense to me. Even if there was a way to download magazines or something along those lines, then they wouldn't even have to send out print here. If you could just like flick through it on your computer in a digital format, that would be pretty dope. But yeah, I don't know what the deal is. Maybe it just costs too much for the amount of people that are going to buy them here in Australia. And I think in general, the problem is kids won't go into the store and buy a magazine. They'll just go on their phones and just scroll.
these damn phones just, it's weird. Like I get it, but it's also just like, I don't know, the end of an era. Nothing lasts forever. It's unfortunate though, because once all these magazines really don't do print anymore, I feel like I'm gonna be like, damn. But like, I get it though. It's just so much easier to just scroll through your phone. But it just, I don't know, there's something about landing a page, and maybe I'm just holding on to that nostalgia because I, had my first photos in a magazine and the early-ish 2000s, and you're like, damn, like I got a full page in King Snow or Transworld in 2007 or something like that. And it's just like, you're so excited to be included in that magazine that you read and consume on the daily and idolize like your Bible. But now I don't think kids look at those like their Bibles anymore. If like they run across a snowboard magazine and they snowboard, they'll flick through it, but they're not going to run to their local spot where they can buy one of those magazines anymore. Like I used to be like, on this date, a new magazine comes out, go to the local shop, buy the magazine. Where I feel like kids now, they just consume it if it's in the path of least resistance, which is basically just ends up in front of them. They'll flick through it, not knowing. And I think that you said that you edited a magazine for a year. It's like, there's so much work that goes into that thing. Like, can you please just read the whole thing, you son of a bitch? Like,
writing like thousands of words, and the people are just like, but it is like a visual sport, and it's like, and I get it. I get stuck in the vortex of Insta and checking out what people are up to, and yeah, it is what it is. Times have changed. I don't think it will be lost forever. I mean, some people love video and learning that way, and some people love having a book. Like I'll listen to audiobooks and my wife will read books. Like she won't listen to them. And I think it's just, there's always going to be space there for something. And if we can globalize it and have one spot where all that stuff is, and we get all the dopest stuff in one area, that would be pretty epic. That's for you to do though. I'm too busy.
I think you're right. I think that social media it's going to keep growing, but maybe social media is like snowboarding in the 90s/early 2000s, where it's eventually going to plateau and people are only going to use it a certain amount. It's not going to get any bigger. And like you said, your wife is consuming books, and then books have plateaued years ago because it's like that's been their thing. So maybe we're just waiting for it to plateau, and then snowboard magazines will plateau, like they already did plateau. And then we have this playing field where people can know how much money to throw into the categories. Because right now there's not, like, snowboarding doesn't know how much money to fund everybody to snowboard. And I'm imagining you growing up, you mentioned earlier their photo incentive. That was a big way that snowboarders could like make some money or make a living. And then to be able to be like, I'm going to leave Australia and go to Canada on all the photo set incentive I have. Like for me, my first trips that I ever got to do outside of Canada were all funded by photo incentives. And now I'm imagining there's not a kid that has photo incentive. And if it is, it's like $35.
Yeah. And they're all their incentives revolve around Instagram and stuff. It's like you make a clip, or there is some competition results, but a lot of the kids that I coach, it's like, hey, we need you to produce like two minutes worth of video each month, or it's all about instant social media. So it's just shifting. And I guess the thing is, these kids, like a bunch of I'll have kids film on their phones in the park, and they'll have an edit made, and a sick edit built before I get home. Like, they're so good on making stuff quickly that it's sort of wild. But then the sponsors sort of take advantage of that as well by not really rewarding anyone properly. Once they get to a certain point, it's just like, oh, well, you want something? Well, I'll just go get the next kid that can make it like a minute faster for free.
It's like teaching, I remember teaching my dad back in the day when we got a computer that was finally running fast enough to do anything on. and teaching him how to do like file, copy, paste. I feel like I'm getting to that when I see these young kids making these TikTok videos in 15 minutes beside me, and they're moving their fingers so fast. The other day, well, not the other day, last summer I was at home, I was hanging out with a bunch of my cousins, and one of them was literally laughing at me trying to make like an Instagram video. He's like, oh my God, this is taking you forever. And it's like seeing him walk, like edit and move his fingers on his phone and like how to do it and like the apps that he has. I'm like, oh my God, I'm my dad now learning how to do file, copy, paste, but it's just in a totally different context now. Like I am a pathetic old man who doesn't know how to use the modern day computer. Or like my girlfriend just got a job in marketing and now she's got to use TikTok all the time. And like, I'm watching her learn it. And I'm like, you know, that there's a 13-year-old girl who's just like, oh, this bitch is slipping.
Oh yeah, man. It's crazy how fast they are with that stuff. It's like, they're like, you got that clip, airdrop it to me. They get in the car, they grab my phone, they grab everything, like, and then it's made like that night, which is sick because then I get heaps mad edits for Turn and Burn for my company, my snowboarding coaching company. That they just, I used to hire a marketing, like a filmer, but now I'm just like, well, one of the kids, I'm just like, hey, it's your job this camp, and I just pass it around. I'll be like, can you make an edit today? Can you make an edit today? And then
totally,
they just build them so fast.
And that's another thing. It's like, is everything just going to be on the phone? Because I see you must be frustrated if you're a photographer and then you see all like you go to a spot and it's like this sick, yellow wall with a cool red ledge. Homie's going to front board it. Everyone's there and the vibes are high. And you set up your flashes and you bring out your nice expensive camera with your lens and you're waiting for the light. And then right when everything's perfect, you look to the right, left, and there's 10 other homies that are just sitting there with their new iPhones like, yeah, let's get it. Like, and then you get in the car and you look at your photo and you're like, oh, it's perfect. And then you're like, can I see your iPhone photo? And you're like, oh, this is just as good. And you already posted it and shared it. And now my photo is worthless. You fuck. Like,
oh man, it must be so frustrating. I mean, I think it's going to become that point. Obviously night stuff and rails but like, what are you shooting for? It comes down to what are you shooting for again? If there's no magazines and it's just going digital, like you don't need a $10,000, camera. You need a $100 phone bill.
Which is so like, you have to, maybe the whole way to look at it is you only should do things that you love, because at the end of the day, you should only do them for yourself. And if you love shooting photos and you like cameras and you like photography, for sure, buy the camera. You'll never be bummed. But if you're trying to use photography to make yourself a career out of snowboarding, which would be a snowboard photographer niche, is like smaller and smaller by the day. Like shooting with a staff photographer that you shot with for a long time, Colin Adair. It's like Colin shoots with us still, but he's got a full-time other job doing landscape. Like he owns a landscaping company now. And it's like, I don't know if these young photographers have like, they don't see the old ones being like, damn, like Scott Surface is still crushing it. It's like, that homie doesn't shoot photos anymore for snowboarding. He's got kids to feed.
Yeah. You've got to do, I feel like if you can do everything out of the love of it, you can figure out how to make money out of it one way or another later on. If you shoot photos for snowboarding and you're just doing it out of the love, you're going to become a dope photographer, and then you're going to figure out how to you can make money from photography. Maybe you're just shooting architecture, or you're doing, stuff for a real estate agent, shooting inside of houses. Like there's a way to make money out of photography. Maybe you got to, it can't always be, can't always have the sparkles. Sometimes you got to grind a little bit. So you can just got to mix it up and do a bit of both.
If you have to switch it up, like we bring our own camera now.
Yeah.
We're our own photographer because it's so inconsistent whether a photographer will even come. And then every photographer has their own way about going with the photos. Some of them send it to you the next day. You can use it for Instagram. Some of them are like, you don't ever see the photo again. And you're like, why did we bring him up? Like,
it was so sick back in the day when you'd have like, there was like 10 photographers in Whistler, and you'd be like, call them all up, and you'd be like, who are you going with? Oh, we're going with the Man Boys, or I'm going with Bert. And you'd be like, oh, sweet, I'll call Barker or Adair or, Dalby or something. There's so many photographers around that you just like be able to just sort of, someone was always there to take an image, which was rad. But that's when we had like 3 magazines in Australia that need to be filled, and more in Canada, and 12 in the US, and a bunch in Europe. So I guess just with demand, it diminishes. But you guys played it smart. I feel like you guys did it well, because you guys did your own filming too, right?
we do now. I mean, it's a full Rusty shoots the photos and Rusty shoots the video now. Yeah. He got dropped by Oakley 2 years ago, which was a huge mistake on Oakley's part. But, I don't blame Oakley either. It's not like, let's be honest. I know the most about snowboarding. It's just, you can't argue. It's like, if I have a snowboard podcast and I've been doing it for this long. So, I mean, if I went to the Oakley office and sat down at their table and then they told me why they let Rusty go, I'd be like, none of that makes sense. You would pay him the least on his whole brand. He's riding better than he's ever ridden. Like, if Rusty would have kept riding and his back would have stayed, he would be a natural selection, no doubt. Yeah. It's like the consistency of his riding got so special to watch live. It was crazy. Anything he would try, front 7, back 7, cab 5, switchback 1. And yes, I'm labeling stock tricks. But when Rusty used to throw a snowball off of a step down or a jump, he would fucking land by that. He would land right on top of it or right beside it. And I think that more than most of our listeners, how hard that is to do when you're hitting a step down or whatever. There's always like, oh, I drift on this spin. It's like, Rusty doesn't drift. He just lands where he's going to land. And it was so sick to watch. There's nothing worse than being in the backcountry with a hazard.
I think the thing is, like, people don't understand about step downs. Like, you might only have like a 10, 20 foot runway. So 1 foot can make the difference. I used to always do, like, pretend I was running. That was my thing with step downs. I'd be like, if I ran as fast as I could off here, where would I land? That's what, and then I'd work back from there. Like, that's how I did it. Yeah.
This is the Australian technique. It's very rare.
Obviously not as consistent as Rusty.
Oh, we're going to get into that, buddy. You were very consistent. And I think that actually, let's open this chapter, because this kind of makes sense for right now where we're at. So you just come to Whistler, like you were saying, you got all your 4.9s and you got really good quickly, because Whistler does that to you because you're surrounded by a bunch of good riders. Maybe let's touch on that. When you first get to Whistler, what's the scene like in Whistler, and what made you get so good, and what was the vibes like, and who was riding at that time, and talk about a little bit about the energy that the town had when a young Ryan Tiene showed up.
Yeah, the energy was strong, because that's when all, like, I don't know, that's when Dev and all that were, like, in town cruising around. You'd see all the pros just cruising around, and they wouldn't ride the park that much. I didn't see them up there that much, but like Andre was still up there, Jeff Brown, Robin. I think those guys were like, I was watching them shred a lot. And I'd follow, there was a few Aussies there. Koya was there, Kiwi Koya, Joel Webb, who was an old Kiwi snowboarder. And then obviously I had Charles, who was actually, Charles is one of the, if he didn't have injuries during his career, he was an amazing snowboarder. And he's still really good. He just got really unfortunate with injuries. But I used to just follow him around. He used to just teach me so much stuff. But they were sort of the guys that were up there, and they're still shredding like super hard. I was there like a couple of weeks ago, and Andre was still there, just like boosting over the hip, and getting me all jazzed to do stuff, even through a front nine, shack right, just to get a little buzz back happening. Tried a couple tens actually, didn't work out.
Love the honesty.
But yeah, it was sort of those guys I think that that helped push me, and just the consistency of riding every single day and pushing myself. And I sort of, I left school and everyone told me not to. They were like, you got to go get a job. So I had a point to prove as well. Like I was like, even though I wasn't that good, I wanted to be a pro snowboarder. So I think I put that out into the universe, and then I had to sort of back it up, which I think is what helped motivate me. I enjoyed when people said I couldn't, because it sort of made me hungry to prove them wrong.
There's a lot to unpack in that, especially with the Robin, Andre, and Jeff Brown. For those that don't know, that's like a Whistler trio of really good boarders, and they've been riding the park since the early 2000s. And well, Andre and Robin in particular never wanted to be sponsored, pro, don't film, ride the park every single day. I think they're both into their 40. Yeah, they both are into their 40s now, and they still have all way nines on like 50, 60 foot jumps. And there's like 3 jumps in a row, and a back sev, front sev, cab 9 is like an everyday thing. Maybe I linked that poorly. Back sev, front 5, cab 9. That would make their line a little bit more X Games and steezy instead of the revert on the before the cab 9. But you also kind of led the charge for Australian boarders to like come to Whistler and experience that. You said there's a couple people that had done that before you, but if only a couple people from an entire country have come to Whistler to like give it a shot, it's like, that's impressive that you even thought about doing that. It's also impressive that you mustered up the courage at a young age to be like, fuck it, I'm going to do this. So it's like, where did your parents just say like, okay, go to Canada and see if this works? Like, you won Style Wars, so I'm imagining you had some backing and some support at that time, but like, I feel like that's a bold play. And I'm wondering, do you remember what was in your head at that point? Were you like, I'm going to move to Whistler to like experience Whistler? Or are you like, I'm going to move to Whistler to fucking be a pro snowboarder and I'm going to do this?
Well, I went to Whistler to be a pro boarder. I didn't go there to buy like cheap drugs and get drunk like a lot of Aussies do. But so I went there with a purpose, like I had my goals set. That's what I wanted to do. And that first year that I went, I hadn't won Star Wars yet. That was like when I couldn't do the spin frontside. And that's when I learned all those tricks. Went back, did Star Wars, and then I actually did the 2 seasons in Salt Lake City. And I filmed those like parts with Mountain Lab 1.5, and I filmed these Australian videos called Digital Snowboard Magazine. They were like a digital magazine where you had like bonus sections and trick tips. It was pretty cool format. But I filmed with them, and I did Mountain Lab 1.5. And once I did 1.5, that is when DC sort of gave me the opportunity to film with Sandbox. So I'd never ridden a snowmobile before. I hadn't really done any backcountry at the time, but that was my passion, was backcountry. Even though I hadn't done much of it yet, I knew it was what I wanted to do. And that might be through who my influences were with Walsh and Ika, and I loved those guys with snowboarding, and that's what I wanted to do. And Whistler just seemed like the place to be. So I actually moved to Whistler and had that opportunity to film with Sandbox for all day, every day, which was amazing. And for them to take on an Aussie that couldn't ride a snowmobile, hadn't filmed any backcountry, that's a huge leap for them as well, which was cool. And yeah, went over there. I bought Nick Gregory's truck, who was the guy in Positron that did the Switchback 7. He at the time was like, he was getting out of snowboarding. I bought his truck and I bought an old pro skier's snowmobile. So I had a setup and just rolled into town, truck and sled. And then, yeah, just went out to Seagram's and just got stuck a million times. And then, and then figured it out, I suppose. And that was, it just got busy. I think Rainbow Jump was where it sort of clicked for me. We went up to Rainbow and everyone was going right in between this one tree in the middle and straight. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to cut super hard left. And I was like, did something out of the blue and I did a front five that way. And everyone was like, have you ridden power before? I was like, oh, yeah, a couple times. and then, because we don't really get like power, you know, it's like, you couldn't build like a big Whistler jump here. It's like we get a lot of wind with our snow, so it's pretty hard packed. But yeah, power is my passion, and I wanted to be a professional snowboarder. And I wanted to ride backcountry, and I just put myself in the right situation, and I had the right backing with DC, and then Sandslone and Clayton Larson were huge in giving me that opportunity to start.
You had a bad ass, like dope, very dope trick selection. And you would get that from people like Devin and Ika. You know, think of Devin, you think of back one, switch back one, method, switch method, you know, great, one of the best trick selections. And that's where you probably see Ika get the same thing, like switch stale five, switch stale fish, switch back five, backside rodeo, like not these weird kooky contest tricks in the backcountry, just like beautiful looking shots. And when you first came out with that part in Sandbox, I remember being like, who's this fucking new guy who just gets a full part in this movie? Because I was like, every person in Whistler or like in Canada was trying to like get a part in that movie. And I was like, well, damn, he's got to be good if he's in the movie and if he's backed by DC, because obviously none of us at this point had heard of you. I think Jeeves, obviously being on DC, had heard of you, but like everyone else was like, who is this guy? And then you drop this part and you had the last part and it's like front five, switchback 9 or switchback 7, front 9, like really tasteful tricks. And I would say that just to point out, the back 7 melon and the switchback 7, you are up there with like the best of. Like your backside 7 melon is, if I was getting coached, and we all know that kids don't know anything about snowboarding anymore because they're stuck in their own little wormhole. So they probably don't even take the time or the courtesy to Google who you are. After coaching for like 3 years, they're like, whoa, you're actually pretty good. I finally researched you. You're a legend. It's like, I hope you're teaching those kids backside 7 melons and switchback 7 mutes. Cause it's like, woof. Like, did you fuck up your first time you got that switchback 7 in the backcountry and you were like, oh my God, how did I land this?
Yeah.
Because that's a hard trick.
Yeah, but it wasn't hard for me for some reason. I don't know, that way feels good for me, the switchback. So switchback, like backside is actually a worse spin for me. I'm better at front and switchback. So, even though they were my worst spins when I was growing up and learning, I don't know, I just probably spent so much time on them, they became the dominant way that I'd rather go. But yeah, switchback, like that one just clicked for me because I was good at front fives. So I just take off and I just like rip it and then I just go straight into like front 5 indie. So that's how I thought about it. And then, so that one for me is just like comes really mellow. So, and you're landing like the cab and back 1 and back 5, they were all the hardest tricks for me to learn at the start. The blind tricks where you sort of want to jam on your toes, but when you're learning them, you sort of roll onto your heels and you wash out a fair bit. I used to do that all the time with those tricks when coming around blind for like, yeah, back 5, back 1, cab 7. They were always my tricky ones in the backcountry, not coming around forwards.
I've seen you land all those tricks in the backcountry, so I just don't believe you. I'm thinking of you right now. I'm like, ooh, back 5. I've seen you land that a bunch in the backcountry. Back 1, I'm like, you've had like 4 of those. So
yeah, but if you look at all day, every day, I don't think there's a back 5, a back 1, or a cab 7.
Let's talk about that for people that don't know. Well-rounded part and diversity of tricks and the
Yeah,
importance of that.
super important. Like I used to write, I used to have like obviously an idea of where I wanted to get to, but I sort of stopped doing that as much because I'd get disappointed with my days if I didn't accomplish what I had written down. So as I got older and wiser, I just went out there with a blank slate and just sort of figured it out. This jump's going to work for this. Obviously, I'd try and avoid tricks that I already had done, which I think is smart when you've only got a limited amount of days and you want to get a lot of stuff down. So, yeah, I mean, trick diversity is everything. You can't have like 20 front threes in your part. You have to have a lot of, I'll watch a video part and I'll be like, oh, he had a front three there and there and then there. I'm like, I don't really like that as much as say he would have done anything else. Just like, I just think you have to have diversity in your parts. And I would never have multiple tricks. I don't think. I'm trying to remember, but I don't think I'd have the same trick twice in a video part ever, which is, well, obviously year to year, yes, you'd have the same tricks. You can't have new tricks every year, otherwise you'd have no video part. You have to do some of the same things, but try and avoid doing it on the same features and try and switch up your tricks as much as possible to build a really nice solid part. I love people that have street and backcountry like Solas and you. For me, I did that a little bit at the start. I think I had a couple of shots in all day, every day, shine on, and then in the storming, which was for standard films. But then I got super knocked out on some stairs in Kamloops or something. And then I was like, I don't even fucking like handrails. Like, I'm like, why? I was like, why am I like here? I'd rather like hurt myself in the backcountry. I don't want to hurt myself here. Like, so I just quit that. But I love riding rails in the park. But I
love that. That was amazing, Ryan. It's like, I like that you're like, damn, I really like these well-rounded video parts. I'm gonna do that. But every time you're at the rail, you're like, but I don't like doing them. I like the look for the video part, but I actually don't enjoy this at all. And it took you to get fucking knocked the fuck out to be like, this is not my shit.
not my jam.
No, and the streets, like I jumped back into them this year and it's like they're less forgiving. It's like everything is firm. If you do like a rail to drop or whatever, it's just like, oh, like where the backcountry is just like you throw a snowball, you find out it's the landing, and you're like, well, if I make it to there, it's like, I'm gonna roll down in a giant transition. And it's like the bigger you go, that's when it gets kind of gnarly. It almost seems like hitting a backcountry jump that's big is safe, but once you go really big, it gets really scary because then you're like, I don't know, like a 80-foot park jump or an 80-foot backcountry jump. If you go end over end on an 80-foot park backcountry jump, it's like you're going for a fucking rag doll. That's going to be gnarly. Or like a front seven on a 80-foot park jump, it's like as long as you make it to the landing and don't overshoot, it's kind of like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think like once you crash a million times learning how to snowboard, you can figure out how to crash pretty well in the park because you can just like slightly over rotate, slide on your butt. Like not getting hurt is the key to being an amazing snowboarder. Because you're going to get flogged. Like learning how to crash properly is like one of the key ingredients. And I think I figured out that early. But yeah, sometimes you can land absolutely bolts in the backcountry and you're like, I got it. But no, you do not. 10 front flips later, you're just like bodied in the bottom, lost your lenses and your beanie. And you're like, oh, well, I thought I had that. And now I have to go do it again.
You just yell to the filmer, is it cuttable?
Did I land for long enough? Nope. I was like, fuck.
Maybe talk on what terrain in the backcountry was the hardest for you to master, or was there one that you found was like this avenue is difficult? Did you find there was one that seemed to be harder than the rest.
Yeah, riding lines is really hard for sure. I don't know. I don't know if I just, maybe I'm just like a goldfish and I can't remember like where I'm supposed to turn so I don't die. Or it's just like, it looks so different from the bottom to the top. And I think that's something that people don't realize for the guys that do ride lines, especially long ones. Like one wrong turn and you go over a ridge and you can die like pretty quickly. Like you can, like on those gnarly like AK lines and stuff. Like you go, like you're riding a spine and you're like, okay, I got to turn left here, and you don't turn left there, and you go like an extra 50 feet and you fly off like a 100-foot cliff. Like lines are tricky, and I only did like little lines in Whistler, and I was getting bodied all the time, but at least I was like flying out into open like paddocks instead of like more lines. But I think that's where I struggled the most, and maybe that's just from not riding big mountains growing up. Like I didn't have lines or pillows or anything. I had like little round mountains with parks. So I always found jumps, like more freestyle, bigger jumps, easier to deal with. I actually didn't mind riding pillow lines. They sort of came pretty natural to me. Yeah, I think step downs took a while to figure out, just because it's something I'm definitely not used to growing up. It's just like when you're at the top of a step down, it just looks like you're going to land like in wherever it's flat at the bottom. That's where it looks like you're going to land. So to figure out speed and how to do tricks on step downs was probably a sticky point. But you just grow as a snowboarder, and as you get older and wiser and you do more and more seasons with it, you just get stronger at the things you were weaker at.
Maybe touch on cheese wedge jumps. They were the biggest. You were probably in the era of where they were the biggest boom. There was like the 90s was no cheese wedge. Like they started building them. Tech 9 started spraying their logo on the back of the jumps. And like they were ugly and weird, and then they really blew up in like, I don't know, 2005 to 2015. It was like everyone was, Travis Rice obviously was building the biggest ones.
Yeah.
I feel like they're kind of downtrending these days. Like they still exist, but they're just not as like, it's not the main focus, I feel like.
Yeah. It's
Why,
good, man. I wish I was
why do you think that is? And did you love cheese wedge jumps?
Yeah, I mean, I loved them. Obviously, they took a lot of effort and work to do. I wish I snowboarded more in hindsight, just in general, and just like figured out different avenues to get shots. But it's sort of like you're a product of your time. And when I was coming through, that's what we were doing. It was, especially in the sandbox days, and then when I filmed for Standard Films, it was very cheese wedge heavy, because I was filming with like Belzil and Torstein, and Torstein was like putting in a lot of work, putting up a lot of big wedges, cheese wedges everywhere, so he could do triple corks and I could do front threes. It was, but yeah, everyone was whacking up a lot of cheese wedges. That we were getting pretty good at it. I mean, learning how to build them wasn't hard. They just took time with cutting blocks. I think filming with Dev and Ika and Aero and Benji, they sort of changed that a little bit, which was good. I got to ride a lot more step down stuff, a lot less effort in builds, because Dev was never really the guy that wanted to build like a 60-foot cheese wedge. Like he never really was that down on. He was into finding step downs and cool trannies and more about the shot rather than how big you could go on the feature. So I got a bit of a blend from both ends of the spectrum. I got your Torstein end, and then I got your Dev space, and then I was just along for the ride with two snowboard gods.
Okay, let's get you to quickly speak on those riders, because I did this the other day and I thought it was just so dope. So you got to spend some time with Torstein. say a little bit about Torstein, just like maybe his riding or whatever. And same with Matt. You said you spent a season doing standard with them. What was it like to film with those guys? And like, you know, maybe what was their strengths, or what were you like, damn, impressed with?
Yeah, I got to. So I met Torstein when we were in New Zealand. That was when he had that front cover with Ken Block's car. So I already knew like he was, you know, that was when he was like winning X Games and everything. Like he was absolutely the man at that time. And we hung out, but I knew that he was the big dog in town, and I was just like gonna do whatever he wanted to do, which I'm fine with. I'm not. My ego was not tarnished by that. I knew where I sat in the ranks, which was fine. He loved building wedges. I like building wedges. We were just definitely doing different tricks. Torstein was rad. He definitely had strong vision on what he wanted to accomplish. Sometimes in the beginning, I think he found it hard to articulate the words without sort of coming across as a bit of a dick, maybe. But to me, that's what he just like to articulate what he wanted to do. He was so headstrong in what he wanted to build that sometimes he came across a bit rude, and that could have been a language barrier as well. So I'm not easily offended. I'm Australian, so it was fine. We worked well together. But yeah, I think as he grew and I grew, our working relationship probably got stronger. And then, you know, he's got way chill once he started taking mushrooms. Yeah, I think we get along probably more now than when he was like really in that grind. But he obviously had big visions for where he wanted to go, like bigger visions than I did, and that's fine. I was happy just to be there. But he was the greatest and the worst person to snowboard with, because he made you look like an absolute chump everywhere. Like that guy's a freak. Like he's so good. Like I was like doing stuff and I'm like, wow, that felt so good. And then I'd like look back up the hill and he's like doing a bloody, I don't know, 720 more than me and just like crushing, and goes back up and does it again. And it was sick to be a part of, but it also was like a little deflating, like being in that position when you've got someone who's a once in a lifetime talent, and then you've got just me from Australia, chucking some sevens and nines. I guess we had totally different approaches and styles, but yeah, that guy was just, you know, it's Torstein. Everyone knows who Torstein is. He's did the first triple gork. He's a freak.
No, I know exactly what you mean. It's like that riding with people with that once in a lifetime talent has been my go-to since I've been young. Like I grew up riding with Jake Kuzik and Andrew Jeeves, and it was like the only reason why I got good is and Kevin Griffin is because I was like, oh, I live in a small town with 3 people who are so much better than me, and I just want to be able to I just want to hang and feed off of their riding. And I mean, it's so inspiring to ride with people that are better than you. It's like, if you ride with people, that's the reason why I'm imagining when you leave Australia and you come here and you said you learned all those nines, it's like you're riding the park and you're surrounding yourself with every hungry, I mean, individual from around the world. Girls and guys, you know, people are just sending it. So you're like, well, this is inspiring. Where if you just, you know, go and ride your local skate park or go ride your local wave or go ride your local snowboard park, and it's just the same people there every day and you're the best. It's not a lot. Well, there still is some motivation to get better, but there's a lot more motivation when you see what's possible. And you're like, whoa, everybody can do switch backside sevens. So I'm going to try a switch backside 9. But when you're riding with Torstein and you get a little bit older, maybe it's the best to kind of find your lane, because you're like, maybe I shouldn't try a triple cork. Did you ever try a triple cork?
He wasn't like one step ahead of me. Like it wasn't like I was doing a 7 and he was doing 9s. You know, like there was multiple steps between where I was and where Torstein was. So I definitely had to like figure out my own lane in there, which was which was fun. And he did push me, which was great. Like I did do stuff that I probably wouldn't have done without him there. So thank you, Torstein. I always had someone to sort of chase. Like I was never like the guy in the team. Like I was never like the top guy in the team. I was in the team, and I felt appreciated, and I knew that I was doing my job, but I wasn't Torstein or Dev.
Yeah, it's like you said, once in a lifetime freaks. I mean, like you have Torstein, who's like the once in a lifetime most like raw talent ever, and then you have Devin, which is just like he's one of the inventors of snowboard style. It's like that's like one of the most powerful statements for like a 20-year plus career. Or way longer than 20 years, but 20 years of video parts, you know what I mean?
And just thinking about that now, I think I was like the middle point of them both. Like probably technical wise, I could probably do more tricks than Dev, and style wise, you know, I tried to emulate Dev, and then I got closer to where Torstein was trick wise. So sort of somewhere in the middle.
You're the average of your 5 best friends.
Nice.
And that's what they say. You're that. And it's like, if you just put yourself in there, you became the average.
I'm happy with that. I'll take the average too.
I don't even know if I got to become that between Jeeves and Kuzik. I don't know if I became the average there. I think that I was like, this is impossible to keep up with these guys.
I mean, I got to live with Kuzik for a little bit in Whistler when he first came out. And he was just like such a humble kid, but always had that like, everything was just perfect from so young. Like when he snowboarded, like all these presses, I was like, how do you just like make that? Everything's just like so crispy when he boards, which was cool. And then Jeeves is like the complete opposite, just so much raw talent, just in a body that just wants to explode. And he was nuts, and he has so much raw talent. He just couldn't quite pull it, all the aspects he needed together to be a pro boarder, I suppose. Like he had the talent, but just there's just a few things extra that you need to really gel with the squad. And I think maybe DC let him go too early before he really could have shined. I think he probably needed some more help in that area. And I think if they were more open and we knew as much as we did about mental health and strength, I think we could have helped Jeeves become the snowboarder that I think he could have become. And I think that's a shame. And I'm bummed that he wasn't able to showcase that to the world as much as he could have, because he was a once in a lifetime talent as well. He just didn't quite get the opportunity to get to it.
I feel the exact same way. Beyond talented, needed some support, but the topics that we cover on mental health and just the education that's floating around now on those complex topics were less known back then, of how to treat and how to deal with somebody with some bad habits at a young age. And I just don't think that anybody knew how to deal with that. So it was just kind of, I think that if there was a new team manager in that place, or the same team manager, but it was, 10 years later, they would have looked at that situation much differently. And then we would have seen some of those mind-blowing videos. I mean, we still did. Like, he went on to film with some of the craziest footage. It was just on a much smaller scale than when at one point it was like, I went to the DC trade show at SIA in Vegas, and the poster, the DC you walk in is just a massive poster of Jeeves dropping in on this dam and his face painted. Like, he was the poster boy for the DC. Like,
I was in Australia.
It was nuts. And I was like, what? Like, and then we went to Europe, and we went to a couple other places, and there was billboards of them. We went to Japan, and people were fanning out on them. And this was before the age of social media. So you couldn't really attach a number to Andrew's stardom. But I'm imagining if Andrew had just came out right now, and he was like the young it kid. He would have like 300,000 followers on Instagram already, and his face paint would be like all over TikTok, and he would be the biggest thing ever.
Was it time well wasted when he front boarded the triple king?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, like that video was the one that I wanted to go film with Sandbox. Like watching that video was the one I was like, oh, this is the dope movie. Like I thought that was the best movie that came out that year.
There was some really good snowboarding in those old Sandbox movies for sure, especially Andrew's part. And I mean, he was 17 when he filmed that part. That's the best video part of all time, period. Nobody has even come. I don't even think there's ever been anybody remotely close to filming that part at that age. A 17-year-old typically has like still that lingering little kid style attached to their riding. And you can see it. You're like, oh, you're becoming an adult, but you still have little kid style. It's like Andrew at 12 years old looked like a pro at like 12. Like he didn't have little kid style anymore. Me and Kuzik and everybody, we had funny outerwear and we looked like kids on the hill. You know what I mean? You know, when you see a kid do a front seven melon, you're like, oh, there's that cute kid. He did a big front seven melon. It's like when Andrew did a front seven melon, you're like, yo, is that like, I don't know, Paavo Tikkanen? Like, who is that?
He was able to figure out his body.
Yeah. But yeah, I like how you navigated that because it was very tasteful because Andrew is one of my close friends and I love him to death. And he is the first to say that, like, he partied a little bit too hard in those earlier days and it would have been nice to navigate that a little differently, but it didn't happen. And he's in love with a chick and his life all panned out. So he's stoked
again, which is sick. I've been watching all these clips on Insta. He's been like hitting the streets.
Yeah, for the soul. He's just been snowboarding in the streets for himself, which is cool because he's just posting on social media. He's not filming for any projects. He's not trying to prove anything. It's rad. But I'll take this to a question that I had because it never happened for me because I got cut. So whatever.
Don't worry, we all get cut eventually.
I know. I've realized that after doing this podcast. You're episode number 62, and I've definitely had quite a few people get cut by various brands. So I know what happens. Okay, DC ring, turning pro. I want you to talk on just the mental shift that you may have not known about when you got that ring. When you turn pro, you get the ring, maybe touch on that whole, how that came to be, but also just like the follow-up of like where your head went to when you become pro on a company as big as DC. Cause that's like, that's a big pro. It's like being pro on Burton at the time or something like that. You know what I mean? It's not like, oh, he's pro on drop gloves. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like you're on a team with like the biggest heavy hitters.
It was a trip, but I think I felt like I'd earned it. Like I did 2 years at Sandbox. I had good parts, and then I'd filmed the Storming standard films and TB20. I was already riding with everyone that was pro. Everyone that I was riding with was pro except me. So when it switched over and I got the ring, which was like one of the greatest days that could happen to an athlete, that's been their whole goal from when they got on DC at 16, and then I think I turned pro. I was like 22 or something like that. I was beyond words. I can't express what I felt when I got that ring. It's like all my hard work had come to this point, and I'd actually I'd made it, and it was cool. I was in Trout Lake when Dev was there, Ika, Jeeves was there, Vitaly, Nick Olson, and I didn't know it was coming. I'd filmed a little bit with Ika earlier in the year, and the cool thing about the DC Pro team was I think that it had to go through the whole team, and that everyone had to tick it off. So it wasn't just like the team manager made the call. I think like Dev and Ika and all those guys had to say yes. Torstein, Bittner at the time, Lowry, So we had some big dogs there, and got the tick of approval from everyone, and we were just out to dinner, and Nick just slid the ring case across the table, and I was like, I didn't know what it was. I was like, what's this? Like are you giving me some like cufflinks or something? I don't know. I just didn't know that it was coming at all. And I opened it up and I was like, really? And then, yeah, it was a trip for sure. And, posted on social Instagram, got a few comments, which was epic. But the mental shift didn't change that much because I didn't have to do anything differently. I was already doing what they expected of me to be pro. So there was no like new expectation. There was no meeting saying do this. I think they already trusted me to continue doing what I was doing. Like I'd always hit my incentives. I'd always produce a part unless I got injured or something. But I wasn't lazy or I wasn't going to show up to shoot. I was there every day. I was there organizing photos to get sent to magazines, and I self-managed myself and my images. I made everyone's job quite easy in a sense that I did a lot of the groundwork for everyone, including the magazines, including the photographers, for my team managers. So I think as soon as they gave me the ring, they knew that I would just handle my business. And I guess I did. I didn't need any supervision or pushing or anything. I just got on with it and just kept continuing the journey that I was on, which was just to go out and whack wedges and just huck body.
Exactly. Well, I guess I was alluring to, I feel like when some people turn pro, and I think I see a lot of my friends do this, after a couple years, you watch them try and not have any flaws in their snowboarding. They ride through the park. They try to just look steezy and dope. And I did that. I remember doing that. I remember being like, I don't want to see these younger kids, these AMs. I don't want to see the young kid that's on the local shop, or the kids that don't have any sponsors, but are just like, you can see that talent. And they're all over Whistler. They're littered. They're sitting in the trees. They're smoking joints, taking a piss. They're sitting at the park jump. They're on the deck filming. And so they're everywhere. They're on the chairlift. And I just felt like I felt like I was frozen for a year. It was probably 2015. I remember just being like riding through the park and not wanting, or maybe even younger than that, and not wanting to screw up. But that's a huge problem. I feel like you still need to put yourself in uncomfortable situations, because that's how you continue to learn.
Yeah.
And,
something I'm super passionate about, and I actually run camps now called the Readiness Camps, where we talk about mental strength, and I'll get onto that in a little bit. But that definitely happened to me, and it's something I regret hugely, because I thought people expected a certain amount of perfection when I rode the mountain, whether it was Front Valley Park in Australia where everyone's there, or the Whistler Park. And I ended up not riding as much, and I plateaued in my skill set. And I don't know if I got caught up in the world of being pro, and I just stopped actively riding, because that seems like that's what everyone did that I rode with. Like if I went and rode the park, I was the only one out of my crew in there. Ika didn't ride the hill. Dev didn't ride the hill. No one was really riding the hill. No one was pushing the boundaries on the hill. I have more fun now riding the mountain than I did when I was pro. And that all comes back to ego and the image you hold. You think people are watching you, but I realized that no one actually gives a fuck about what you're doing. They're too worried about their ego. They're thinking about what you're thinking about them. People are messed up. Like that's, we judge I was judging my happiness on the hill by what someone thought about my snowboarding, which is wrong. Like it's okay to fall. The only way to get better is to fall. That definitely happened to me. And I understand the point you were trying to get at, and something I'm passionate about now, because I coach kids that have got amazing talent. And I'm like, can you try this? And this is where it came back to my snowboarding. This is why I created the camps called the Readiness Camps. So I would coach kids that were starting to get sponsored. I found it happen in young female athletes a lot worse than males, but still happens in males as well. But they didn't want to crash, and they weren't scared of crashing. They were scared of crashing and what someone thought of them crashing. Like, not scared of hurting themselves, just scared of falling in front of their friends because they thought they'd look silly. And that's when I really took a deep dive into like where I was in snowboarding and how badly that affected me. And it did freeze me up, and I'd never reached my full potential because I was too worried about what other people thought about, this guy should be perfect, he's getting paid to snowboard, where it shouldn't be like that. So yeah, long story short, I started some camps called the Readiness Camps. I talk on them. We have like Tora, Tess Cody, Zoe Zadowski, Sinnett. We have all these wakeboarders, surfers, all come in, ex-athletes, athletes, and we talk about mental strength and pathways and understanding that your path is your own, and it's okay to fall, it's okay to make mistakes, and making mistakes is the only way to get better, and just basically fuck what other people think, because it gives you freedom, and you wouldn't think you were trapped, but you are until you can get rid of those barriers.
And you talked earlier on just visualization, like seeing your tricks and then being able to like kind of do them. And I think that's so important for people in all aspects of life. Like, if you can't see yourself getting to where you want to be, it's going to be a much harder road, where if you can visualize it, it's like the path is already set. And I think that, like, if you're going off of a jump and you're like, oh, I really want to do this switchback 7, and if you can't see it happening, you're probably not going to make it happen. But the big difference between park riding and backcountry riding is, once you do backcountry with the same crew, so you filmed with DC a lot, so you build a level of, you build comfort and you build real relationships and friends. So people know if you're having an off day or a good day, and they're all part of the journey. So you feel comfortable trying new things. So do I right now. And I film with like the Man Boys, and I go out with Rasmus or Rusty or whatever like that. I feel comfortable trying and getting out of my comfort zone to try new tricks and push my riding, because I know that they're not judging me. But you make up this false narrative when you're riding the park that everybody is judging you. And like you said, nobody's judging you. Everybody's worried about their own shit. There's the guy that's sitting at the top that you think is thinking about your riding, and he's thinking, I wish that my ex-girlfriend would text me back. She still doesn't text me back. Somebody else is like, man, I really got to take a shit. Somebody else is like, my boots are killing my feet. And then maybe one or two people are like, holy shit, that's Ryan Tiene and he's pro. And then you screw up the back 180 melon, and then they're immediately like, damn, my head's kind of itchy, or like my earphone's sitting weird. And you're in the landing because you didn't grab your melon right, and you're like, everybody hates me, and nobody thinks that. And maybe a couple people do. I feel like there's a couple people that live on that, but it's like they are trapped in a bad mental space, that they're a judgy person, which we all know, the ultra judgmental type. And it's like, they're not that fun to hang out with, because they judge you on what you wear or what your haircut looks like, just as bad as they're critiquing their favorite pro riding down the park. And
it's usually someone that is much less skilled than you. So like, why do you care what this person that you've never even talked to or have any social interactions, a random person on the chairlift might judge you, but who cares? You don't know that person. Like, why should that affect you and how you see yourself and perform on day to day? Like, yeah, it's no one cares.
When I asked you to touch base on Torstein and actually Belzil at the same time, so I'm going to take a little second here to plug Matt. He's really good at that. He just hit 40 years old. And that's something, he's a little bit of definitely him and a handful of other guys that live in Whistler, massive mentors of mine. And watching him and those other guys we were talking about earlier, Robin, Andre, and Jeff, and just people who ride the park on the daily, who are constantly trying new tricks, and you watch them spin a direction they're not good at and they flail. I don't look at that now that I'm older and a little bit more mature as like a negative thing. I look at like, man, that guy's learning. That's sick. Like he's not so like I need to stay in my comfort bubble and not learn anything, because that's not fun either. You live in your own misery being in your comfort bubble, not learning a new trick. It's like the best thing you can do every once in a while is to step out of that. Be like, okay, I got to go to front three. I should learn the front five. I might flail, but I might land it. So I'm going to get a lot of joy doing that. And then the local people who know you're riding are going to be like, damn, Jody learned a new trick today.
Yeah, you want to be in that stretch zone, right? You want to be just. Sorry, someone's drilling into my
machine
wall.
Gun or
No, we don't have guns in Australia. Sorry, Americans. But yeah, what was I talking about? That is very loud.
No worries, I can edit that out.
You want to wait 1 second?
Yeah, sure.
Let's see.
I can see him in the background right now. He looks like a child.
He's there.
There he is. Oh, he's wearing a blue shirt.
A couple of down pipes for this rain.
Are you guys getting rained on right now?
No, we got rained. We got like crazy floods like 6 months ago, but it's a lot of hard to do any landscaping when rain just falls off your roof and creates giant holes.
I wonder if he's going to drill again.
No, he's down. What was I talking about?
Bitcoin. No, I'm kidding.
Nothing.
No, I think we were talking about Matt and park riding and comfort zone.
Yeah, that's your. We were talking about you want to be in the stretch zone, right?
Stretch.
That's it. Like you want comfortable, like you can do as much stuff in your comfort zone as possible. Like I can go to a front three. I'm not pushing myself. But when I went to do a front nine in Whistler, that was in the stretch. I'd done it before, but it's been a while, especially on a park jump. So, and that's when you get that feeling, that release of like energy when you do something that you are not quite sure about, but you think you can do it. You want to be in that stretch zone. That's where you build like your best skills, which is there's a chance to fall over and there's a chance to succeed. That's the stretch zone. That's where you want to be. That's when you get the most joy out of boarding. If you're just up there, just doing the same thing every day, it gets hard. And maybe that's why I didn't ride the park that much during those pro years, because I was just doing the same old stuff, trying to look steezy and doing front threes and making sure everyone thought that I was the man they read in the magazines.
Then you live in the misery of your own narrative. You've made up something in your head that's not true, but then you're also becoming miserable, not learning anything new. And then eventually that starts eating you away, because you're like, I am good, I should try a trick. And then you try it, it doesn't work out. You're like, why didn't it work out? It's because you haven't been doing any tricks for a year now, because you've only been doing steezy front three indies and you haven't tried any tricks because you've been scared to do them.
Yeah, it's a vicious roller coaster, and I wish that I learned more about this when I was in it, because I could have been better. And that's the one thing that frustrates me the most, not having the opportunity to go back, and that's probably my only regret, is that I could have been better, and that annoys me still. And that's something, so that's why I'm passionate about trying to instill this stuff into the kids that I coach. It's like, don't let other people's thoughts ruin your experience.
Yeah, I love that this is so sick. Just the best part of the podcast already. The only regret, at least that you've articulated on this podcast so far, is that you lived in your comfort zone and you never reached your full potential. It's like that right there is like so powerful. I feel like anyone who's listening to this is like, damn, like, because I bet you there's a lot of people who are listening to this right now who've been just living in their comfort zone for a long time, and not in snowboarding, but I just mean like in life. And it feels so good to like make that career shift, or to quit that job, or to take that leap. It's like you either live in the misery of your comfort zone, or you live in the hypothetical misery of you moving towards your goal. So, I mean, I'd rather go to the hypothetical, put a positive on it, and be like, most likely this is going to work out, than living in your comfort zone that's clearly making you unhappy anyway.
Yeah, you gotta try. And I always read those like quotes of like people interview like elderly people and they're like have these regrets about not doing things. And I think that's what you want to try and avoid.
Yeah. There's a famous quote, act as if it was, and it will be. And I don't know who ever said that, but it's like perfect.
People get into debt quick and then they get stuck in their jobs. And because they want to floss to their friends about how much shit they have. Like, you know, like you get trapped quickly that way. If you go into debt early with sparkly things just because you want to flex, but you're in debt, and then you get stuck in that job, and then you have a kid or something, like you're stuck, and then it's hard to get out. So.
Yeah, totally. I do sympathize with those that are in the comfort zone because there's like they kind of have to be, but I'm imagining there's like a small change they could make to their daily routine that could help them get out of that. Something small, you know.
Start what you're passionate about and build it up slowly.
I feel like a lot of people are like they put their 8-hour shift in at work and then they come home and they can't even fathom doing like another thing. They're like, I chilled, I did my work, now I just sit in front of the TV, I can't do anything.
Yeah.
The way I would look at it is like, if you hate your job, you have to do that 8 hours because you're trapped. So you should at least put 1 hour towards something that you want to do so you can eventually make an exit strategy. Or so you can be like, okay, I can go from full-time at this job to part-time because over 5 years, those 1 hours after work accumulated. And now I have this newfound talent and passion, which this passion project over the course of 5 years has turned into a way that I can make some side cash. So I don't need to work at that miserable job full time. So now you only have to work part-time at your miserable job. But then maybe over the course of another 5-10 years, your passion project just becomes your job.
I'm just going to build a little garden over here and grow some.
Nobody wants to hear more life advice from me, but they do from me.
Yeah, from me either.
What was filming like Devin, or what was filming with Devin like? What are some things that you learned from him? And let's go on a little bit of a Devin tangent here. Let's be honest. I just want to hear it. This is selfish.
I think Dev is the master of like finding transition and spots. Like you're almost guaranteed to find something with Dev, and it's probably going to be something new, which was always epic. So whenever I was with Dev, he'd be like so good at scouting terrain. Obviously, he'd spend a lot of time. I'm pretty sure he was looking at things, but he was still looking at zones with new eyes. So he'd always find like weird trannies and step downs and bits and pieces to film on, which was rad. I think that was and just being around Dev. But then when we find something big, he'd fucking dominate it, like and crush as well. So he just had a good eye, good blend. He sort of was very experienced. He was super helpful, funny. Didn't have like a big ego at all. He was super welcoming from like day one. And maybe that's because we just got along like from the get-go. Like we enjoyed golf and yeah, I don't know. We just sort of gelled really well together. And I never really had any issues with any crew that I worked with. I gelled with most people, which I was fortunate enough to be, I don't know, likable enough and got my work done and professional enough that I got along with most crews. But Dev was just to be out there with, after watching his videos growing up, it was a trip. It's like you ride with these people you look up to for so long, and you're not sure how you're going to be when you get there, but then they just become your boy and your friend, and then all of a sudden it's not like people trip. I'm like my friends that aren't, that don't know Dev but know who Devin Walsh is, and I'm like, oh, I'm just texting Dev to see where we're going tomorrow, and they're like, you're texting Devin Walsh? I'm like, yeah, I'm texting Devin Walsh. Like, and people are like wigging out. I'm like, yeah, I'm just gonna go boarding with him tomorrow. Like, jump off some shit. Like with Devin Walsh. I'm like, yeah, Dev Walsh.
And young Ryan Tiene is thinking the same thing, being like, the first video you watch is Simple Pleasures, and then you're like, damn, I'm hanging out with Devin Walsh. This is crazy.
I want to come play golf tomorrow. I'm like, yeah, I want to come play golf, but it's not like I'm going to play golf with Dev. I'm like, because it's Dev, I'm just going to play golf with my friends. So it's like, it's crazy the way it like shifts and changes when you do meet your idols, when you realize that they are just epic humans as well as great snowboarders. So I think that's where, I don't know. He's Dev. He's obviously done so much in snowboarding, and he's my goat, and that's who what I wanted to snowboard like, and he was my inspiration. And then he just became my friend, which is even cooler.
Yeah, they say never meet your hero unless it's Devin Walsh. Pretty sure that's a quote. What's your favorite trick that you got to see live of Devin?
Switchback 5. It was a jump that we were struggling on. Like I knuckled the shit out of this thing, and then I knuckled again straight into my bomb hole, like boom, boom, like straight in the same hole, got absolutely bodied. It was during Must Be Nice. And he just came in Dev is so light, and like, I don't know, the way he came around did this switchback 5, and he just landed so fluffy, and it was just like that landing. It wasn't like that. It was a heavy landing, and he just made it look so easy, and just floated like a little butterfly down into that transition. And Rick was on point. Obviously some back ones, all the things that I grew up watching. I didn't care if he did like a 9 or something. I just wanted to see him do like CAD 3 or, a back 1 or switchback 5. And I still appreciated those moments, and just him doing big shit and doing it steezy and trying to get inspiration out of that.
I texted Nick Olson before we did this podcast, and I asked him like, why were you hyped on Ryan? Why did you put him on the team? What was the thought process behind all that? And he said his snowboarding always reminded me of Devin. So like, why? Obviously I'm going to do that. So, which I thought was a sick compliment, because Nick Olson's always loved good style, has always had really good taste. And for him to recognize that your snowboarding isn't the next Torstein and is more devoted to being an Australian trying to imitate Devin is very smart of him, which it was too. I mean, your snowboarding was, you could see that you were trying to like replicate some Devin and some Ika and your other heroes, whoever that may be. But like everybody says, it's just like you try to do that, and it's an unachievable, unattainable goal. You will never look like your heroes. You just won't. Your body, your height, the way your body moves is just never gonna work. But it's cool because there's a little bit of it that works, and that little bit makes you have that unique style. And you can see those people at like an old age who looked up to like Jamie Lynn, and you can see the next generation that looked up to like Peter Line and Devin. And then you see people who looked up to like Eman or Lewif or Kuzik, and then the new generation like Tommy Gesme or whatever. And you see all these people, and you're like, I like can ride through the park. I'm like, that kid fucks with Jed Anderson. Or like that kid right there wants to be Torstein from 2012. He just watched like Horgasm the other day on YouTube and is late to the party on the tall tees and everything like that.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah, it is crazy how
we got a barrage of workers on Teeny's house, so we apologize for some of the screwing, but it's got to happen. He's in the middle of a fucking rainstorm. This guy's got to put some eavesdrops up.
Someone's got to build this. I can't do that. I can lay flooring and I can paint.
Yeah, it looks like you could use another coat on your ceiling. No, I'm kidding.
Oh.
I'm a painter. I'm joking.
That's like, look how high that is out there. Outside, see, outside's not done.
Oh, wowzers.
I had to get up there, paint that. That wasn't that fun. There's a lot of paint on that ceiling. I don't know what I was talking about. Something.
Yeah, no worries. I'll edit those out too, the hammers. I re-listened to these, Ryan, so I can take this out.
Sorry about that. I could move maybe. Can I move, or is that going to be bad?
Oh, you can do whatever you want. You could move into, if you feel like there's a place in the house that'll be quiet, for sure.
Let's see what's over here.
It's not like anybody on YouTube's going to be like, oh, I changed the background.
Sure. People are pretty annoying.
Yeah, people are. Oh, dude, this house is fucking huge.
This is my bedroom. Got a couch in here.
Oh, wow.
It's my ensuite.
Holy shit.
Done.
Oh, you're living the life. Look at you. You did it.
So this is my other bathroom. Look at that thing. That thing's.
Oh, this is my other bathroom. Look at those gold fucking fixtures.
Oh yeah, we got that brass. It's my daughter's room. It's cute.
It's very cute. Do you like your daughter? Do you like your daughter?
Yeah, she's so much nicer than my son.
You don't have two, do you?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Leo just turned 6.
Oh,
and Capri is 4, turning 5 in Feb.
Leo and Capri. Do you want, maybe, because I'm gonna have to cut this anyway, the next thing I want to follow this into is just you touching base quick style on like the DC team, because you spent so much time with them and like each rider individually.
Yeah, we can do that. Like my thought on their individual styles.
Yeah, just like them as a person, they're snowboarding, but like quick, not like super elongated, because there's like, fucking 7 people on the team.
Yeah, well, I just got to make sure I have them all. We had Bittner, Ika, Dev, Lowry, me, Torstein.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that it?
Actually, how long has it been? 2 hours? Yeah, totally. I mean, we could, if you want. It's up to you.
Oh, it's all good. We could talk about. I commentated the Olympics and stuff. I did some other things.
Well, no, I have other points down here, but we can talk about commentating the Olympics too. Okay, it's quiet again. I'm gonna take over this podcast again and do what I do best.
Go fuck it up.
Because I gotta get going probably in 15 minutes here ish.
You go hard.
I gotta go hard in the paint here.
Guide me.
Okay. You had a long stint on DC. We got to touch base on it. How did the end go down? And maybe not just the specific day, but the year leading up to it and the year kind of after, and maybe take us through what your mental space was the year before, when it happened, and then the follow-up year, because I feel like there's a lot to extract from those emotions, as I have lots of friends who have been let go. And I feel like there's always like a lead up mentally and then kind of like their afterthoughts. So I'd like to hear what your story was for this.
Yeah, I was in Saasfee at the stomping grounds. I was actually coaching 2 kids. I was just dipping my toes into coaching a little bit at this point. And Bobby Meeks was my team manager, called me up. Before this though, everything was sweet. Like a new contract was coming up. Everyone was like, yeah, be the same again, 2 years. Like hyped on your part or whatever. Like I was stoked on my part. That was my Wildcats part. I think that was a pretty strong video part in that one. And I was all good. I was feeling fine, comfortable. I didn't go looking for other options because I was told that it was all good. And then I got a call in Saasfee like a week before I actually got the final course. And Bobby was like, look, man, I don't know if we're going to be able to re-sign you. You might want to look for some more options. And then I was like, fuck. I just had a kid at the time. Leo was 3 months old. Had a mortgage, and I had nothing else to fall back on once snowboarding had ended. So I quickly got on the phone. It's very hard coming off top to bottom off DC, and it's not like I was asking for like 20 grand, from other sponsors. I needed a certain amount to continue doing what I was going to do. And I'm going to walk around and talk at the same time because I needed my charger. But I couldn't afford to take a little contract and do what I was going to do. I live in Australia. I needed to make like 50, 60 grand a year just to cover going to Whistler, having a truck over there, having a car in Australia. I needed to make a certain amount of money to pay my mortgage. So, not many people were that receptive to what I needed, other sponsors. So DC was only my real option to fall back on. And they called me back a week later and basically said, look, man, we're sorry, but we can't re-sign you. And I was like, what, not even for less? Like I'd capped my incentives every year at like 30 grand. Every year I was getting like 50, 60, 70, 80 pages of editorial. I was filming video parts. I was doing everything right. And they just said, look, it's not anything to do with performance. It's to do with the company, and we just don't have the money to sign you back up. And I think DC was going through a period where they knew that they could take my salary and probably pay like 10 young kids to film Instagram edits. So made sense in hindsight, but I was obviously bummed. That night I went to Torstein's premiere. He had a premiere in Saas-Fee at the Stomping Grounds. And I remember I was like crying to him, and I was like, dude, I'm fucked. Like, I got a kid and a mortgage. But I soon turned that into something else. I just kept, I guess, I knew that I had someone that was relying on me, which was my son, Leo. And I think he was the reason why I didn't like fall into like a deeper spiral, and I had to get back up quickly and figure it out. So I'm blessed that I had him there as motivation. But I moved quickly into, I edited that snowboard magazine. I moved into a head coach role at TSC after that. And then, I just took anything that came my way. I was taken. I took a job with like the Australian snowboard team. I was helping their slopestyle team. And then that company that I was coaching for actually went bankrupt. So I started my own, Turn and Burn. And then that just grew and evolved into what it is now. And I worked for a company called Awaco and did some stuff with them. And I just like basically just said yes to anything that came my way, and just sort of figured out what I liked to do. It ended up going down the coaching route, and I found a passion there. And then that's obviously evolved into being able to, live and support my family, which has been amazing. But yeah, I think going back to the actual dropping, I was definitely down, but I'm really, really blessed that I had Leo, who's my youngest son. I had someone there that needed me more than what I needed for myself. I could have like gone into like into a weird state where I didn't want to do anything, and I could have sold my house and just sort of given up a little bit. But I knew that he needed food, and I needed to give him a life. I brought him into this world. I needed to create him a safe space for him. So I just got over it and let go of my ego that we talked about earlier, and just got on with living and trying to make the best of it. And now I get to go shred more than I shredded before, and it's all turned out epic. I guess just saying yes to everything that came my way, and having someone there that made me just made me step outside of myself. It wasn't about me. It was about my son. And I think that helped.
Most snowboarders in your shoes who get to that level of pro, when you're making a decent income, especially when your eggs are all in one basket, like a head to toe, like DC or Burton, and you get let go and you have a family and bills. And for your case, it's like you have to live in two places that are very far away from each other, Whistler and Australia, in order to juggle that career. So like you highlighted there, it's like you needed a $50,000-$60,000 contract, and to go to any brand with little to no heads up, it's like that's not going to happen. And they don't take can I sign for half? No. So it's like you lose 60 grand plus those incentives. It's like you're losing almost 100 grand. It's like if you didn't have that kid, it's like I feel for me, that would be a very difficult thing not having a kid to look at, to be like, I have bigger issues here. And I love that you articulated that, like, you brought him into this world and he deserves to have a nice, safe, comfortable life. And he doesn't deserve to have like a father who's willing to just live in this like sad comfort zone. And it seems to me like you had to push yourself out into a bunch of new, uncomfortable, and put yourself in these vulnerable situations to be like, hey, I need this job. Like, did you have to like kind of make a call like that to these like acquaintances slash like friends of yours that worked in these spots? And you're like, hey, like how did you get some of these jobs? Like, I'm imagining just being kind of vulnerable at that point and really putting yourself out there.
I think when I look back in hindsight, the reason I got all the opportunities I had was because of snowboarding. So all the opportunity that DC gave me, even though they dropped me, ended up coming around to what I have now. I was able to start my own coaching because I had a name that DC helped me build. I was able to edit the magazine because I'd been in it for 1,000 years, or like 10 or 12 years. So when the editor stopped there and they knew and people knew that I was out doing other things, I was the first person they called. So I think building all those relationships during my career, and the opportunity that DC gave me also led to my career after snowboarding. So I was super bummed at DC, but now I'm super grateful for the opportunities that they gave me. I'm not bummed at them at all. I wouldn't be in this position without them. So yeah, it's just, yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. Did I answer it?
Yeah, that was bang on. Did you go through you talk about ego a lot. I feel like you've spent some time learning about that whole field. Do you feel like your identity, which was Ryan Tiene, the professional snowboarder, kind of took a little bit of a beat down when they let you go? Did you struggle with that at all when the next time you showed up to a park shoot? Or I know that you filmed another banging part the year after, not on DC stuff. Like, how did that feel? And maybe I'm selfishly asking this because, I mean, I hope that all my brands continue to support my riding, but as we all know, inevitably there is an end date. And like, how did that feel the following year, showing up to, the snowboard scene, feeling different now?
Well, this is when I realized that I had an actual serious problem with my ego and how wrapped up I was in myself as Ryan Tiene, the pro snowboarder, not just Ryan Tiene and pro snowboarding. I was one unit, and you shouldn't think like that. You should be yourself, and then you should be snowboarding as well. And I remember I felt the worst ever. I had to put on like the full instructor uniform at Threadbow and go up there and coach. I had to buy all my pride, and I remember how shitty I felt. I remember calling my wife and I said I didn't think I'd be here, like in this position. Like, now I put in all that work and now I'm like back here. But if I didn't go and do that, I wouldn't have been able to start Turn and Burn, and I wouldn't have been able to grow the business that I have. So I think swallowing that pride and that ego, and I realized that in the end that ego that I was swallowing, I thought my friends would think less of me. I thought I would be judged for doing a normal job, like, oh, look at this guy's fallen from here to here. But my friends were still my friends. My family was still my family. Everyone that loved me still loved me. There was no difference. So the ego there, and that that shift that I had to make was huge, but it was something that I wish I never had to deal with. And that probably goes back to being judged on the hill and thinking of all these thoughts and this internal dialogue that was going on. But yeah, I worked on it heaps, and it's only been really highlighted since I started working with other athletes and kids that I can really dive deep into my own shit that was going on, and then I can help more people get through those ups and downs and the moving and changing, because it's the same in everyone's career. Everyone's going to get fired. Everyone's going to get let go. Maybe not everyone, but a lot of people. It's just what happens.
I did an episode with Simone Chamberlain, who I was obviously a huge fan of, and he was very open about the end of his career and how one day it just ended, and he had started that big company Nomis and never ended up getting a big paycheck, and a bunch of people owed him money, and it just ended one day, and it seemed like with not a lot of notice. And he had the same thing. He had two options, like to put himself in a new, sad, depressing comfort bubble of misery, or he was gonna continue to push himself. And then he started his construction company, and he articulates that his like day one on the job, that he shows up hammer in hand and is banging nails and realize that he's working hourly as a laborer because he has doesn't have a skill set yet, and his boss is wearing Nomis shorts like in his face all day, and he's just like the guy didn't even know who's Simone's connection to that brand.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm just imagining how I don't want to say damaging, but how hard that would be to remove your ego from like, I deserve X. But instead, I mean, he probably struggled with that for, a day, 2, a week, month, but now he runs a very successful construction company with his brother, and they have happy, healthy families. And I'm imagining that he can't imagine his life have going any other way. Like, he's probably looks at it now like, this is exactly where I should be. But he could have easily, like that, when you're in that position and you all are super vulnerable, just being able to make the right decision for your next step. And it seems like you're really grateful that you had your son at that time, because he helped push you into that direction. So it's like, kudos to that little legend.
Yeah. And I think that's it. I think it's taking the next step. And I don't know where I heard this, and I've said it before. I think it was a skateboarder, but being a snowboarder, it's just, we fall a lot and we just get back up and we try again. And we're built to fall and try again. We fall, try again, built, fall, try again. That's like the cycle of snowboarding getting better. And that moves into life. Even though I probably didn't realize it at the time, but I've been falling over and getting back up my whole entire life. And that's all it is just a consistent journey of this. And as long as you keep moving forward, and you probably put something out there bigger than yourself, which I think is huge, which was my family. I put that above me, where when I was an athlete, I was the top. That once I changed that dynamic, and I was for them, it didn't matter what I was doing, packing shelves at the supermarket, hammering a door in, doing anything, as long as I was putting food on the table, that was enough for me. And so I guess once you change that mindset, that's pretty huge.
Yeah. And I think that you create these new habit loops. And the one habit loop that us snowboarders master is falling, getting back up, like you're saying. So it's like, the longer you snowboard, almost in a way, it's like you've kind of mastered this skill set that you probably don't even know about, of like, well, I'm going to fail at this for a bit, but then I'm going to succeed.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's no way when you were putting on that coach's jacket in like you were saying, you had to put the full kit on, that at the beginning there, that you could see or could forecast where you'd be now. But it's like through some failing and stumbling around that you've landed on this successful camp that you've started, and you're probably just like, yes.
Yeah, I'm just stoked that I've created something where I can still go shred, because I still love it. I'm still learning stuff now, and um, I'm just grateful that I still get to go board and I have all these kids to get inspiration off, and yeah, it's just it's good times.
I agree. Maybe on that note, I'll ask you one more question, and then we'll go through a couple bullet points, and I'll let you go here. But looking back on your career, what would you attribute your success to?
I think my determination, like I put out to the universe that I wanted to be a pro snowboarder like very early on, and I think the fact that I had a lot of people telling me that I couldn't was huge. I took that, we call it tall poppy syndrome in Australia. A lot of people try and cut you down. I used that as motivation, and I pushed hard. I think like I said earlier, I gelled pretty well with pretty much every crew that I ever worked with. I never really had any beefs, and I was hard working, and I was willing to do whatever it took to get the job done for everyone, not just myself. So just being a team player, because it's not an individual sport in the backcountry. You're working as a unit, and I think I fitted well into the units that I worked in, and just my willingness to learn and evolve with whoever I was riding with, and being able to manage my money, because I never made a huge amount of money, which I think is a blessing as well for me, because I was sort of in that weird middle spot where I was making enough to do stuff, but I never got super comfortable where I was like just fucking going on holidays to like Hawaii and just drinking cocktails and forgetting the grind. Like I was still in it that way, so I was like in that little zone. So I think they all of those things created me. But I think if you want to put it down to one thing, it's probably just determination and willingness to do whatever it took.
Bingo. I love that. That's what you got to do. You hear that, people? Determination and grit. There's nothing that quite conquers your goals like determination and grit from an Australian. Fearless. All right. That was dope. I'm going to ask you these 10 questions. These are just kind of quick one-word answers. And then I'll let you go do some construction on your new house.
I got to do a bunch of no more gapping. Actually got to go get my working with children's check, because I start coaching. I fly out tomorrow to Jindabyne. It's shredding on Friday.
Lucky guy. My season's over. And everyone listening to this, most likely their season's over, except for the people that are going to go to Mount Hood or that live in Australia.
That's right.
Which, all right.
Best start of the season in 50 years.
What?
Yeah. It's crazy here. It's nice.
Yeah, well, it must be nice. It's been raining and cloudy here in Vancouver / Whistler for way too long. It's actually sunny today, so I'm stoked on that. All right. Best style currently and back in the day.
Ooh. Well, Dev for me back in the day. And what's the kid called? Front 12 pyramid gap the other day. I just watched it.
Yeah.
Jared?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jared Elston.
I like the way that guy boards. I enjoy his back seven because it reminds me sometimes of mine if I do it really good.
It does. His one at Natural Selection was very teeny. Good eye. Favorite grab on a snowboard?
I think it's melon or indie. I don't think it's not a method. It's not my favorite grab. Most people probably do say that. I think it might be indie, to be honest, because you can do like crail, you can like tweak it, like nose bone it. There's a few different variations there that you can sort of get funky with it. I think it's indie. Straight up.
It's indie, dude. You picked it. All right. Biggest pet peeve.
Pet peeve. Like I try not to have them anymore. Just really. Like I don't know, pet peeve. Probably when someone like expects a lot but's unwilling to like do anything about it. Like it sort of frustrates me a lot. I'm just like, well, give me a solution or think of something to deal with it. Don't just come and whinge at me and like not have an option.
Yeah, I don't like entitled pricks either. One snowboard movie that flew under the radar.
Oh, flew under the radar. Probably as a great, I reckon it would be Time Well Wasted, because that was probably my like one of my favorite like videos back in the day.
I agree. That movie was very sick. Sandbox, Time Well Wasted. Go watch it. It's actually on YouTube. Number 5, best trick you've witnessed with your own eyes somebody do in front of you.
I mean, biggest trick I've saw, I'm not sure if it's the best trick. I saw Torstein do that triple cork in the backcountry front side of the Jack Johnson. Is it Jack Johnson? That step down in?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I saw him do it there. But best, oh no, it's not. Switchback 10 arrow on perfect jump.
That's great.
It. Yeah, that was the best thing I've seen, and he did it like first go.
That was sick. Number 7, first thing you would do if you won the lotto.
Not tell anyone.
And just be the secret low-key baller. I love that. I love that look.
I think if you tell everyone, you're in for some drama.
Yeah, you are. Jody would be hitting you up in a heartbeat. Oh, remember that one time we did a podcast? Send me $100,000. All right, one piece of life advice. We've kind of gone over that, but maybe there's one in particular.
I think we've nailed it, but I think that's the biggest thing I've learned is to not go outward and bitch about other people's problems, but potentially look inward and just like figure out your own shit and what works.
Perfect. Career highlight.
I guess it's career highlight. It's a tricky one. I guess because it was the start of like my career properly, was probably getting Ender in all day, every day, and then it sort of kicked on from there, which was pretty epic.
It was. All right, the last question. Who is the GOAT?
I already said it, I think.
You did.
My GOAT is Dev.
Hey, that's a good answer. That's been a common answer. That's a regular occurrence on this podcast. It is Canadian, but
because I think my GOAT is more about like bigness and style, and that's how I emulated my snowboarding rather than how many spins you could do.
Please teach your kids that.
I do. Don't worry, they get it.
Ryan, you're the man. Thank you so much for setting some time for coming on the show. I've been a big fan since your first part in Sandbox.
Thanks, brother. It was epic.
Hopefully I watched your whole career unfold in front of my eyes, and I'm stoked for you. Congratulations on the 2 kids, and I hope that we get to snowboard together this winter. And maybe I'll be looking for a job coaching at your snowboard camps sooner than later.
I'll be back in Whistler in April, so let's touch base in person.
I like it. Let's please do that. I won't have a concussion this time.
Perfect.
All right, Ryan. Have a good day.
See you, buddy.
Peace.